Brutal Bitcoin massacre. Bitcoin is currently falling below the $80,000 mark or is just scraping at the $80,000 mark. We really need to take a look at what's going on here. This is an absolute emergency video. Bitcoin is supposed to crash even further now. There are now several releases indicating that Bitcoin is being actively manipulated here. First of all, we have a release from the Democratic Party that actually, no joke here, they warn of a Bitcoin pump. They warn that the Bitcoin price will escalate massively. And they want a statement from Donald Trump now because they suspect insider trading. Additionally, there are more leaked emails suggesting that there have been systematic efforts over the past years to destroy Bitcoin, not just suppress the Bitcoin price, but also to spread misinformation, and there has been a massive Bitcoin smear campaign going on. This smear campaign is still ongoing. We need to take a look at why we're at a crossroads here, with a lot of forces working against Bitcoin on one side. On the other hand, there are also other charts, like the M2 money supply and global liquidity, suggesting that Bitcoin is on the verge of the next breakout. Before Bitcoin breaks out, they first try to flush the retailers out of the market, pushing the weak hands to sell and possibly even deliberately provoking a crash. It all starts off relatively unspectacular. Here, there's actually an article from the Rhenish Post. It is said that Bitcoin is like the tulip bulb in the 17th century. Strangely enough, though it's mentioned in the article, confusing Ecuador with El Salvador. Here, it was claimed that the acceptance of payments in Bitcoin has failed in the Bitcoin country of Ecuador. But it is, of course, here, El Salvador, not Ecuador. But those are just minor details. Here you can see how the smear campaign starts. And here Bitcoin might be systematically brought down. But the real heavy hitters are really coming now. Now you all need to pay close attention. Senator Elizabeth Warren writes a letter to crypto guru David Sachs, asking how he plans to prevent the president and other private individuals from directly benefiting from the Trump administration's efforts to selectively pump the value of certain crypto assets. So, they're basically warning about a Bitcoin pump here. If we take a look here, it actually says, Trump administration is looking to selectively pump the value of certain crypto assets. So here, it's being talked about that there's a fear here that the Bitcoin price is going to be pumped up and that there are insider manipulations. That means we're now seeing that the Democratic Party is escalating. She doesn't think it's a good idea to set up a strategic Bitcoin reserve. And we're now seeing globally a lot of forces that are currently speaking out against Bitcoin and definitely want to bring Bitcoin down even further. They want to crash Bitcoin even more. And they might also want to completely push the retailers out or not. The retailers, but they want to push the weak hands out. I can tell you right now, hey, don't let stories like this throw you off. Neither when someone brings up the tulip bulb story, that's absolute nonsense. We don't even need to discuss that Bitcoin is not a tulip bubble. Nor when someone comes along saying, yes, here. Now everyone in politics wants to pump up the Bitcoin price. And we need to do something about that. Yeah, I kind of agree, there is definitely a certain vibe to it, but on the other hand, Bitcoin is still the best asset out there. And when we have such a superior store of value, then sooner or later, everyone has to use that store of value. That's why sooner or later, everyone has the incentive to pump Bitcoin up. But I can understand, from the perspective of people who don't own Bitcoin, it might seem like manipulation or something like that. And it's also manipulative when someone uses insider information like the 50x long position that was out there, where some people suspected it could have been someone from the Trump camp who was trading off Donald Trump's tweets. I mean, if something like that comes out, then it would definitely be insider trading. It would definitely be forbidden. But on the other hand, there are people like Nancy Pelosi who are obviously trading some laws, clearly using insider information to pump up their stock portfolios. And this is also coming from the Democratic camp. So, Nancy Pelosi also comes from the Democratic camp, just like Elizabeth Warren. And such things are simply not addressed. That's just ignored and overlooked. And with Bitcoin, they're really hammering down on it, trying to exploit the current weakness in Bitcoin, to crash the price even further. But trust me, it gets even crazier. We'll take a look now. A really big player who has been trying to actively manipulate the Bitcoin price for several years. But before we check that out, we need to quickly take a look at Peter Schiff. Because Peter Schiff is actually posting right now. I just ordered a TREZOR so I can transfer both my strategic Bitcoin reserve and my crypto stash from an exchange wallet to my own private wallet. I need to use self-custody to ensure maximum transparency about the status of my reference and my stash. So, Peter Schiff has now also started stacking Bitcoin, has set up a donation address and something like that where you can now send Bitcoin donations to the biggest Bitcoin critic here. And he actually got himself a TREZOR hardware wallet and is giving a big recommendation for it. If you want to optimally secure your Bitcoin against hackers and keep it completely in self-custody, then I'll put a link down below to a Dresden hardware wallet that I personally use. The absolute best, or in my opinion, the best hardware wallet on the market.
And here, with the code Bitcoin Hotel, you get 10% off the purchase of such a hardware wallet. So if you want optimal security, then definitely take action now.
But that was just a little aside because I found it really interesting that Peter Schiff is now also using a TREZOR. Now we're getting to the really intense attacks against Bitcoin. It's now being said that internal emails from Ripple, which were set up in the context of the SEC lawsuit over unregistered security sales, show that the company behind the spread of the fat Bitcoin is controlled by China. So there were false reports that Bitcoin is controlled by China and that the whole China fat story, there have been rumors about fat popping up every now and then, about the China mining ban and who knows what else is out there. And it seems that Ripple has actually been actively trying to destroy Bitcoin for years. And that's also what a lot of people really see as very, very critical here. Because the Ripple Foundation has also funded Greenpeace's Change the Code campaign. So it seems they've now funded the China FUD campaign, where a lot of rumors were spread, that somehow China can control Bitcoin or that China controls Bitcoin, and so on. But we all know that Bitcoin is decentralized, and that's always really tricky because you have to clean up the whole mess again. I mean, yeah, it's also a good way to create content again, so you can make some content about it, but it actually goes even further. Now, something else actually happened here 2 or 3 days ago. Anyway, Brett Garlinghouse, the founder of Ripple or the Ripple Foundation, writes here that Ripple is proud to support the founding of the National Cryptocurrency Association. In recent years, cryptocurrencies have catapulted into the mainstream. Today, 55 million Americans own and use cryptocurrencies, and many more are curious about where, when, and how they can incorporate this technology into their lives. That sounds really great at first. National Cryptocurrency Association, a chain-agnostic, non-political, non-profit organization, aims to help by educating and raising awareness about the benefits that crypto technology brings to real people every day. Attention, independent of Ripple, but we are proud to support them. You can find more information here, down. That was a post here from Brett Garlinghouse. And the Bitcoin community really freaked out here. Because what's happening here is, by the way, a $50 million package that was used to support the NCA. So they're saying that this is all independent. We created it, but it's still independent, it's non-political, impartial, non-profit, and so on. But what's happening here is that they're basically creating an NGO or something like that, and then they're taking shots at Bitcoin. This is what many, many people here have denounced, that here again the next. A story is being spun here to paint Bitcoin in a bad light. That means that things are sold here like we're making Bitcoin crypto education and so on. But in the end, it's really about trying to talk people out of Bitcoin and push Ripple on them. There have already been a lot of people criticizing this, especially since Brett Garlinghouse was also at the roundtable, with Donald Trump and so on. And it seems they weren't too happy that Ripple isn't being actively bought and promoted by the US right now, but instead, they're focusing on a strategic Bitcoin reserve. And the whole Ripple story is being somewhat sidelined here. And now they're dropping the next bombshell and kicking off the next fat story. I mean, nothing might have happened yet, but in the coming months, it's definitely possible that something will come up and there will be some pushback. Here it comes. And there was also, like I said, I can share the post with you, the Twitter post, there was a lot of massive, counterfire from the Bitcoin community who said, Brett Garlinghouse, you're the biggest scammer. What are you thinking? How can you go against Bitcoin and so on? Hate on it. That's always the question. If your own product is really that good, why do you have to go after Bitcoin? Why do we have to launch end of code campaigns here? So why do we have to go after it now like this? China launching fat campaigns. And why do we have to start the next action again to potentially slam Bitcoin down? Feel free to let me know in the comments if you think it's okay that such parties are actually going after Bitcoin. But we really need to talk about the positive things that are still happening. Things are still happening. They're happening all the time. Adam Beck had a very, very important insight here. He said that people are underestimating the announcement of the strategic Bitcoin reference. It's absolutely, crucially important for shifting the Overton window to push Bitcoin promotion forward in the U.S. It offers the new ultimate reference for sovereign wealth funds, pension funds, and investment funds to add Bitcoin allocations. So that's something you need to understand. He's actually talking about the Overton window. That means you can imagine overturned windows like this. At the moment, if you invest in Bitcoin, for example, then you still have to explain it to your friends because everyone asks, okay, what's that all about? And it's just not recognized as mainstream to invest in Bitcoin. And if the Overton window shifts towards Bitcoin, then at some point it will be recognized because BlackRock has Bitcoin, because Donald Trump has Bitcoin, because the USA has Bitcoin. And then at some point you no longer have to explain yourself if you have Bitcoin here, because it is simply the norm, because it is simply recognized by default. Just like how in the US you have the IRS, or in Germany you have a pension fund or something like that. For all I care, even a savings account or something like that is recognized in Germany. If you put your money in a savings account, no one asks you, hey, why do you have your money in a savings account? Because right now the Overton window is open, and it's, let's say, established and somewhat recognized. This has been going on for many, many years. With Bitcoin, it's something new. People aren't familiar with it yet, and so on. And accordingly, you still have to justify yourself here. And now, according to Adam Beck, the Overton window will shift towards Bitcoin. And accordingly, this is a massive driver of adoption, which also means that even more pension funds, more states, more governments, and more private individuals will start buying Bitcoin. And what's even crazier is this chart we're looking at here. And this is probably the most important Bitcoin chart that exists. Here you can see the global M2 money supply in yellow, and in Bitcoin you can see the orange price. And the S&P 500 is shown here in blue. Here you can see a correlation in a way between Bitcoin and the S&P 500. But you can also see a correlation between Bitcoin, the S&P, and the global money supply. And Bitcoin has a very, very high correlation with the global money supply. And the chart for the global M2 money supply shows a remarkable trend. So what I've just shown you here, the extent and persistence of the M2 increase are hard to overlook. And they seem to be becoming more significant day by day. Even if M2 doesn't perfectly predict the rise of Bitcoin, there's an 82% correlation with Bitcoin. However, the magnitude of this increase is so great that risky assets, including Bitcoin, are inevitable. At least, part of this dynamic, if not the entire dynamic, will be driven up. In other words, the rise in the M2 money supply is too massive and sustainable to ignore. It's not just a small blip on the chart. It's a massive surge. Risky assets have no choice but to ride this wave, whether partially or fully. So buckle up. The next stop is a higher Bitcoin price. Sure, let's flush out all the retailers again. Could be that we correct heavily again. If the whole thread gets spread even further, then it goes down even more. People are getting even more panicked, and then more panic news gets created. But underneath that, we have an underlying trend. And that means Money Peter Go BRR M2 money supply is rising. This means that Bitcoin has no choice but to rise in the long term. So, this is an ultra bullish turn that you definitely need to pay attention to. And now, here's a really important announcement for you all, if you want to dive even deeper into the whole Bitcoin topic. And if you want to buy Bitcoin, then I'll put a link down below for you. 21 Bitcoin. How you can easily, safely, and simply buy Bitcoin. Here, you can get up to 20% off the fees when buying Bitcoin with the code. See you later. Let me know what you think about the current movements. See you later. Peace out.